What's up, guys? um, so in the last video I've talked about my project called Remoto, which was for a hackathon. So let's talk about what is hackathon, like what is Remoto and how it was actually constructed, right? So I will be breaking down Remoto in this specific video. All right, so this is me trying to watch something in my laptop or computer, and I'm sitting far away from here. So whenever I want to change the video, for example, if I'm watching movie and I want to skip some part, I have to manually go there and actually do it manually, so which is kind of stupid. So I was thinking, can I do it automatically? Can I automate this process? And it turns out I can. So before moving further, this is a small request from you guys. Just make sure to like this video, it helps me a lot. Now talking about how it actually works. So this image is actually on the GitHub as well, and it basically represents the whole tech stack about how the Remoto works. So Remoto itself is consists of two different software sets. So first thing is the Remoto Web, which is a Vue.js based web application client, and it's actually a client which communicates with our WebSocket server, which is again written in Python and Python WebSockets. So this is the whole architecture. It uses the Vue.js, and this logo here, this represents Nginx. So this is for the deployment purpose. So Remoto has two portions, or I would say two separate parts that handle two different functionality. The first one is the consumer, which actually takes the event which is being sent from the client and respond to it. And then we have the producer, which continuously send the CPU and RAM usage. So if you have seen the beginning, you will find that we have the CPU and RAM usage. So this is actually live, and it actually represents the real CPU and RAM usage. All right, so how does the server work? So this is actually the directory structure of the application. We have the Remoto Web, which is the Vue.js application. Apart from this, we have the environment directory, image directory. So here you can see the command JSON. So this is the important file which actually tells Python what to do based on certain events. Then we have config.py, it just contains some normal stuff. We have requirements, this is also normal. The main thing is the Remoto.py, which actually handles the WebSocket server. And then I have a webserver.sh, which is just to run the client. So how does it actually interact with the computer, right? That's the main question here. So you can see this is actually the code from the commands.json. You can see whenever this events trigger, we want to run this specific set of keys. So we are basically running or pressing these keys using a third-party library called PyAutoGUI. So it is actually a real popular library among Python developers. So it's easy, and you can find the PyAutoGUI library at this address. So you can see it basically contains the key value pairs of the event name and what to press when this event arises. For example, if I'm trying to stop, you can see I'm just running the event stop and this stop key. And if I want to decrease the volume, I'm using the arrow keys. And for play pause, I'm using the space. And you can see for opening a terminal, I'm using win left plus enter. So this is my key binding. Again, it can be different in your computer, so you have to, if you are using it, then obviously you need to change this thing. And you can see backspace for backspace, speed up, speed down is actually the plus minus. Okay, now moving further, so here I'm actually going to talk about how those commands or those JSON files execute. Okay, so this is actually piece of code from the existing server code, and this basically, you can see a loop, which is an infinite loop. It continuously receives. So you can see it is, first of all, we're waiting for the message to receive. Once you got the message, we are basically trying to parse the library, and then so we are basically trying to parse the command JSON file here. So and then we are basically checking which kind of event it is. So if the event is of type keys, at that stage we are trying to get the corresponding keys, and you can see we are trying to press these keys using this method called pyautogui.hotkey. And you can see if the command is not found, so we are basically printing here. And elif, and you can see there's another sort of event which is type underscore key. So this is the event when you this event is actually for the live keyboard. So if you have seen the video, you will find there is a text box, so in which if you type, it will also be typed in your computer as well. So this is actually the event which is responsible for that. Now, so talking about how the live CPU and RAM usage work, right? So this is again a piece of code which actually explains you how the CPU and RAM usage is being sent. So for sending these two data, we are using a library called psutil. It's also real popular among Python developers. So it basically provides the feature for networking. Now you can see we have while true, which means it's an infinite loop, and it is continuously sending the data to the web application or the client. And you can see after every 2 seconds. Now talking about the WebSocket server, because that is the major, or the most important component of this whole suite of application. So I'm using Python-WebSockets abstraction. So it is basically a third-party library that provides abstraction for implementing the plain WebSockets server. And I'm not using any web server. Okay, I'm not using any web framework like Django or Flask, and also I'm not using Redis. So in most of the cases we use, whenever we want to transmit the live data or something, we use Redis as a channel layer or something. So I'm not using any of these, I'm just using the plain Python WebSockets. So now talking about how this WebSocket library works. So I have a small example in front of you, and I will explain you how does it work. So it's basically hello world in WebSockets. So you can see, first of all, it's asynchronous, right? Because this whole communication is asynchronous, because the WebSockets is a two-way protocol, okay? So it's a bi-directional. So in HTTP request, you basically send a request and then the server will give you the response. But in WebSocket, you connect with the server, and then you maintain that connection, and you can send and the server can also send. So it's like the two-way communication. So we are importing these two libraries, async.io for asynchronous communication, and WebSockets for actually implementing the WebSocket. Then I have a method which basically wait for the message to receive from the WebSocket client, and then it is basically printing the message that we are getting. Okay, and then once the message is sent, once the message is received, after printing it, we are also sending the message. So you can see if you type something like Vivek, so you would get the greeting hello Vivek. Okay, and then after that, after sending the message, we are also printing. So now in order to create the server instance, you need to do something like websockets.serve. Here you need to pass the function name, and then here you need to provide the address in which you want to run, and then the port. And then you can actually get the event loop by this, and then run until complete, and you're basically running the start server, and you can see at the end, line 17, we are running it forever. Okay, now talking about how I have implemented, right? Because my use case was a bit different from it. So what was my approach, or how my code actually handles, right? So I have this piece of code here, which is a kind of breakdown version of my actual code. If you want to see the actual code, obviously you can check out the GitHub repository. So over here, so first of all, talk about this function. It's super simple function which takes the file path as an argument. Again, this is for the commands.json file. It basically parses that file and return the JSON data, or I would say the Python native dictionary. Okay, so talking about here, so first of all, you can see I'm doing exact same thing over here. Instead of running it on localhost, I'm using 0.0.0.0 so that I can actually access this particular server outside the local network. So basically outside my this computer, so I can also access it using my other computers which are connected with the same network. And instead of, so as I mentioned that I have two different portion of the code. So for the WebSocket server, one is the consumer handler and the other one is the producer handler. So producer handlers, you can see the same code I have actually shown you in some previous slides. So the consumer handles the WebSocket protocol event that you're trying to send from the client, and then the producer handler continuously sends the CPU and RAM usage. Now this is the important portion, right? The function called server here. So what it does, it basically takes these two functions and run it continuously, okay, and at the same time. So since it's an asynchronous communication, so it is sort of at the same time. So this is the narrowed down version of my code, how it is implemented. Talking about the issue that I have faced while building this project, and the issue is SSL issue. So when I deployed the web application, I was thinking to not run the client locally. I was thinking to host the client so that anyone can access it and then directly put his or her local IP address of the server, and he or she can communicate with it. But the problem I have faced, so I was using Nginx, so I obviously I would use the HTTPS protocol when I'm hosting this Nginx, the Vue.js application. But the problem was, when I was actually using the HTTPS protocol, at that stage I need to use the WSS, so WebSocket Secure, instead of the normal WebSocket. So the problem with this is I was not able to get it work, like how to create the certificate and how to handle the SSL in the WebSocket. So this was the problem, and that is the reason why the Remoto has a local server. So yeah, this is like how the Remoto works. Now talking about the web application, right? You might be thinking how the web application works. Well, leave it for the another video. So if you need the video on how the client actually works, just let me know, comment it, and I will make one. Alright, so this is it for this video. Hope you like it. So make sure to share it if you want, and if you learned something, let me know what you have learned so far from this video. Bye.